Good morning. You are attuned to Unity of Springfield in Springfield, Missouri, and I am Paul Day, and I'm the facilitator for the Unity of Springfield adult education class, and we call it the World Religions New Thought class. And I'm going to open up today with our daily word for Sunday, April 18th, 2021, and it is pray for others. With mind and heart, I know the truth for each person I hold in prayer. A friend, someone said, knows the truth for you until you can know it for yourself. Praying for friends, family members, and those I haven't met, I center my awareness in the truth that each one for whom I pray is a living expression of God, just as I am. Letting go of fear, I release thoughts of lack, illness, disharmony, or any limitation. I see each person for whom I pray abundantly blessed. I see each one warmed and comforted by divine love that lifts their hearts and brings harmony to their relationships. I affirm their abundant living guided by divine love, wisdom, and understanding. I see each life unfolding in perfect divine order, enjoying security, health, and joy. And from 1 Corinthians, I will pray with the Spirit, but I will pray with the mind also. I will sing praise with the Spirit, but I will sing praise with the mind also. And with that, let's go ahead and get started on our talk here. Oops.
Hi there, my name is Karen Craigo, and I'm here to talk to you today about the intersection of poetry and the New Thought movement. They've been closely linked since the start of that movement in the 1800s, and they still are today. So I just thought it would be an interesting topic for us to play around with. A word about my setting here. I'm in a car. I've been on a camping trip with my sons, a Cub Scout and a Scout BSA, Boy Scout, and I don't have internet here at Lake Pomme de Terre, and I've actually spent about 6 hours today recording, re-recording, and stealing internet from like various public places, and sitting in my car and having the sheriff drive by and look at me suspiciously. So if I get arrested in the middle of my presentation, my apologies. Just wanted to liven up your Sunday morning. And apologies, too, for the lack of visual aids. I had some lovely slides. You would have really enjoyed them. So anyway, I am a poet, and poetry's my passion. I've written my whole life since I started making words. I made poetry and played around with the sounds of things and rhyming and that kind of thing. Of course, you know, poetry doesn't have to rhyme, but I think a lot of us get into it with just the pleasure in just word play like that. So I have this sort of lifetime background of writing poetry, and for me it's been a path of self-discovery and contemplation and meditation. When I write, I'm really going to the deepest part of myself and trying to say something essential. I happen to be the poet laureate of the state of Missouri. I just like to tell that to people because it feels so darn good. It ends in at the end of June, my 2-year term. But did I mention I'm the poet laureate of the state of Missouri? But anyway, my job is to promote poetry throughout the state. And I love talking to groups all over the state. It's been because of the pandemic. It has been mostly online that I've talked to people somehow, despite my apparent lack of ability to do such a thing. But I think it's kind of fun to talk about poetry here at Unity of Springfield. So Unity, our church, emerged through the New Thought movement, and it's that itself was a product of transcendentalism, like the New England transcendentalist. And we kind of think of Ralph Waldo Emerson as being closely linked to the start of our movement. He was sort of a founder of transcendentalism. It's from New England. He was from Boston, in fact, and his father Ralph Waldo Emerson's father was a minister in the Unitarian church, and he also was a scholar with lots of books and big thoughts. And so Waldo grew up around kind of deep thinkers, but also remember he grew up in Boston, harbor city, one of the main harbors of the world. And so people came and went all the time from all over the place. And he had a little more access to Eastern religion influences and other world influences than the average person would have had in the 1800s. Anyway, if you look up transcendentalism, you'll probably find it says something like that truth, at least they see truth as being something intuited from nature. I think that's a little bit sideways because that's Romanticism, right? The Romantic tradition, like Keats, Shelley, Wordsworth, those folks. That's those are all English people, but we had American Romantics too. But the idea that truth comes from nature and close observation of nature, it's so close. But transcendentalism is the belief that intuition is the only way to grasp truth. And I think nature is where we nurture intuition. And it's, in fact, one of the Romantic poets, Wordsworth, thought that poetry was nature reflected upon in tranquility. So Romanticism and transcendentalism are closely linked. But transcendentalism, I think, and the thing that makes it kind of part of our New Thought tradition is the idea that intuition is the source of truth. Why? Because the divine dwells in us, and truth is with that omniscience, that divine omniscience. But transcendentalism, I think, sees, it's hard to talk about, kind of, but there's a holistic quality, a holism to that tradition, and we see the people as connected to the divine and to each other and to the world and to nature. I have a poem by Wordsworth. Where could it be? Hold on one second. Okay, it's been a crazy path today. Each and all, this is Wordsworth, or not Wordsworth, I'm sorry, Emerson's most famous poem, I think. It begins with the line, "Little thinks in the field yon red-cloaked clown of thee from the hilltop looking down." It's, note, the bird doesn't think of you looking at it, right? It's a poem about observing a bird, and he takes this bird home. Skipping a lot of poem. "I brought him home in his nest at evening. He sings the song, but it pleases not now. For I did not bring home the river and sky. He sang to my ear, they sang to my eye." Okay, so he brings a sparrow home because he found his song so pleasing, but at home, something was missing. A holism, right? He liked the way the bird sounded in this natural setting. And then at home, it was just a caged bird. Toward the end of the poem, he talks about how he covets truth and says that As I spoke, beneath my feet, the ground pine curled its pretty wreath. He's back in nature now. Running over the club moth burrs, I inhaled the violet's breath. Around me stood the oaks and firs. Pine cones and acorns lay on the ground. Over me soared the eternal sky, full of life and of deity. Again I saw, again I heard, the rolling river, the morning bird. Beauty through my senses stole. I yielded myself to the perfect whole. That word whole keeps coming up, the idea of holism. But there's just this sense of being sort of connected to the world through your body and your senses, and the divine dwells in you, and you are part of the larger world. And I think that's sort of a good example. Emerson's more known as an essayist than a poet, with such important essays that he's written, but that's a nice example of our theme today. Let me see. Poetry, you kind of heard it there, it relies on compact language, and to me a definition of poetry is it's language kind of pared down to its essential form, so that it's language that there's nothing extraneous. As a poet, when I'm writing, I'm cutting syllables. Like, I won't use a verb that ends in ing sometimes, just because I want really direct language, and I don't want any syllables that don't contribute. Sometimes a bunch of ings, this thing and thatting, and this thing and thatting, it can provide sort of a lulling quality. But generally speaking, if it's just a syllable that doesn't have a lot of punch, it's gone from my poems, because I want things to contribute to the whole. I say a lot, sorry. So your job as a reader in a poem is to help make connections, because it's dense and there are connections to be made if you're to get absolute meaning. Unfortunately, people start to think of poems as puzzles, and that's unfortunate, because poems aren't. They're felt things, and we do best when we participate in feeling them and experiencing them together. But just the general nature of a very dense poem asks you to listen more closely. It's not an easy thing, like just regular talk, to take in a poem, stylized language. Two of the tools of poetry demand a little bit more from you. The simile requests that you make a connection. If you remember from English class, a simile is a comparison using like or as. Like, my love is like a red, red rose. Your love is like a rose. It's that's a proposition that you're asked to take up, and you have to think, well, how is my love like a rose? I don't relate so well to that one. I guess your heart is red. We think of love as being centered in the heart, although I think it's actually centered in the brain. That's an old line of poetry, and it speaks to people. Roses are fragile, beautiful. The thorns seem relevant sometimes. But my love is like a red, red rose. I can see that. I don't like how the blossoms, the petals kind of fall away. So I'd rather say something like, my love is a steel-belted radial, because it's hearty. My love, if I love you, I'm going to take you that extra mile. But that's a simile, making that request, that you make a connection. Then there's the metaphor that makes the demand that you make a connection. Metaphor leaves out the like, leaves out the as, and we might say something like, the heart is a lonely hunter. How's the heart a lonely hunter? It's all alone. It's on the prowl. It needs what it takes down to survive. It's a more of a chore for the reader to try to just to be thrust into that connection making. There's something I like to do with kids when I talk about poetry, and I'll just pick up any item. I'm looking beside me here. Here's something that you don't have every day in the car. A sleeping bag. Here's a sleeping bag in its little sleeping bag case. not very well packed. But how is your heart like a sleeping bag? If I were to say it's like, that's the simile, it's a gentler request. How's your heart like a sleeping bag? Keeps you warm. If you've ever been out in the like freezing cold and you've had a well-rated sleeping bag, then I'm sure you were as delighted as I will be on this chilly night to have this one. I think it's kind of funny the way this one is in its little bag, because you know how you have to fold it over, roll it up, and push out the air as you go, and then you got to stuff it in here, and it kills your fingers, and it's hard to get in. It takes a few tries. I don't know. That seems relevant to love too. That you have to, I don't know. You have to take special care of it, and it makes certain demands of you. So, and you could say too, like, how is love like a pen, right? Love lets you express yourself the way a pen does, I guess. I think too of how pens, like, they'll get like ink all over your pocket sometimes, or sometimes you can't get any ink out of the pen because you've let it sit too long. And then you have to get a piece of paper and just scribble really hard until the ink flows, or even hold a lighter to it until the ink flows, some writer tips. But that's sort of enticing to me, thinking about love being like a worn out pen. You haven't loved for such a long time that it's a challenge to get that going again. What's this have to do with our topic? Well, we're making connections. Poetry makes those connections, that love is this, the heart is that. And it's an exercise in this idea of oneness, that unity, right? That we, that is part of our whole movement here. What does the New Thought movement believe? There's a notion that you have more to say about this than I do, I'll bet. But I wish we could have a conversation. We're consciousness that's larger than the self, right? We are a reflection of the divine and the consciousness of the divine. Divinity is inside of all of us. And through divinely attuned thought, we can achieve good. We can achieve health and wealth and everything that we need. We have that creative power. That really speaks to me as somebody who considers herself a creative person. Here's what I've found. Poetry can be an intellectual exercise. It's a way of showing how clever you are, how thought-provoking you can be. You can actually write illuminating things just through the power of your intelligence. I'm not that I'm like smart, I guess, but it's not intelligence. It's not like being a brainiac that makes me a poet. For me, it is this connection thing. It's poetry when I go deep and I examine language. I'm connected to you, and you're connected to me. I'm connected to a pen. We're all matter. It's a little different to be connected to a sleeping bag than to be connected to you. But that's sort of practice. It's kind of practice in the more essential connections when you metaphorize. It's weird to think that I'm divine. I am God. That's not weird. That's fabulous. But the weird part is that you're God, which is also fabulous, by the way. You're divine too. The divine lives and moves and has its being in you and me. The weird thing is that if I'm God and you're God, then I'm also you, and you're also me, and we're also everybody who's watching this, and everything in the world, everyone in the world, in fact, is one. We're like the giants. What tree is it? The sequoias that... No, it's not the sequoias, but there's some tree that in California that's like all one tree. Every tree that comes up out of the ground is that one tree. I'm blanking. But we're all the same, and we're all connected. And this poetic exercise of finding connections just reminds me of that all the time. The tricky part is I'm not talking about you, person that is watching this, but I look at some people and I think, why do you act the way you do? If you're me and we're God and together, like, we reflect the divine, every single person does, then why do you do the things that you do? Well, poetry kind of helps me to sort through that stuff. It's a tool for connection and understanding. And it's a, if you want to try it, if you haven't tried it before, I encourage you, just as a contemplative or meditative practice, to try to make connections. Go in and make meaning. All you have to do is start writing, and it might be weird and it might look terrible. My stuff always looks terrible, but then I fix it and it looks okay. But yeah, it comes out looking like complete nonsense, and then it turns out something that you're kind of proud of. But give it a try. It's just making connections, which is your nature, is who you are. It's your divine nature. Here's a poem I wrote a while back about some of these themes that we're talking about today. In this, I don't know if you're a big poetry person, so pardon the little explanation beforehand. In this poem, I've had a back injury, which I don't recommend. It's kind of worse than childbirth, because pretty soon when you're going through childbirth, you have a baby and then you don't have pain. But when you hurt your back, it could last the rest of your life. I was lucky that it didn't for me, but excruciating pain, on par with contractions, and terrible. I was taking drugs for it and doing everything I could for it, and I didn't know if I'd ever get better. And in this poem, you'll see me kind of stepping out of my body because the pain is so intense, and kind of walking myself around, taking care of myself, and I'm my own caregiver. There will be a weird part where I'm like, I got my arm around my own shoulder, walking myself into the other room. So, and this poem is kind of springs from the notion that there's, we're talking about transcendentalism, the idea that we would want to leave our corporeal self and leave the body and become greater. Well, I don't want to leave my body. I love my body. I'm imperfect and wrinkly and could lose a few pounds, and I love my body and I want to stay in it. And this poem reminded me of that. In praise of the body broken in two, I woke this way, bent at the waist, vibrating, a silver chime struck with a hammer. For 3 days I've cradled my body in my arms, have carried it swaddled from room to room, tolling like a temple bell. How could I not love any warm thing breathing against my chest? How not love what's helpless, a wounded animal you feed with a spoon? Usually the body prefers to drag itself from room to room and declines my offer of help. Pain, in the end, is personal. Sometimes, though, I'll lean against my shoulder, and side by side I'll make my way from bed to toilet to couch. It is no longer in me to wish to leave the body, be spirit soaring above self. The body is not a wrapper to be discarded. Count me among those locked out and gazing at the architecture of skin and bones, the arches and rose windows, buttresses, crockets, cusps. This place is so holy, you'd have to leave your shoes to step inside. So I'm making the body into a cathedral, Notre Dame. I'm locked out of my body and gazing at the architecture of skin and bones. I have to admit, I was proud of the part where I talk about my body's arches and rose windows, buttresses, crockets, and cusps. Buttresses. I used the word butt on purpose. I just liked the physicality of having rose windows on my body. It's I consider that sort of a lush description of what bodies are like. And yeah, your body is so holy you'd have to take your shoes off to step inside. I wrote some poems about the unity principles. The God is, I am, I ask, I pray, I act. I hope I got those right in case Sue's listening. And here's a poem, the part poem called I Am. Now, in that last poem, I was architecture. In this poem, I'm a balloon animal. You'll hear me like, you'll hear like a long, narrow balloon in the body. Because I'm a poet and I can do that. I am. I feel it when I stop to draw deep breaths and fill up from my base. A narrow balloon. Oh, good, we're back. I feel it when I stop to draw deep breaths and fill up from my base. A narrow balloon waiting to be bent to its form. But sometimes when I'm still, I feel my edges dissolve, and then I am both less and more. Broken this way, smithereen, I get the argument. Maybe I am God, more cloud than sitter on cloud, part of everything there is. You there, with your broke openness, I am with you. I slip through your crazing and chips, so together we can be whole. I'm going to do one more poem, and it's going to be mine, and I'm skipping tons of things that I meant to say, but I'm worried about losing yet another recording. This poem that I've written it's an extended metaphor. I tell you that you're a barn on fire, but then we go through the rubble of the barn and we find stuff and we build something. Did you know you are luminous? There is nothing you lack. You are both spark and flame, a whole sway-backed barn on fire and burning to the ground. Then your rubble, the foot that kicks up ash, the runes and talismans scuffed into black, the flash of new green that will rise eventually with water and sun and a bit of time. There's so much power in you to grow the tree, to age and plane the wood, to craft a church worthy of the touch of your knees. Sorry to turn this into a poetry reading by me, but I'm just a little cautious about presenting too much in the limited time that we have. So hopefully we could talk again about poetry. And I've enjoyed this moment. I hope I've made some sense. And I'd love to hear from you if you have your own poem you'd like to share with me. My email address is karen.craigo, Craigo, @gmail. So I'd love to hear from you. All right. Thank you. Have a good day.
Thanks so much, Karen. I really appreciate you taking the time, and I know that Karen was on a camping trip, and so her recording was done at a campground, I believe, in her vehicle, and I think she even cut it a little bit shorter than what she wanted to, just because she was afraid of losing her recording. But I really enjoyed it tremendously, and I really look forward to Karen being a regular part of our speakers bureau. So with that, I'm going to turn this around, and let's go ahead and continue on. If you would like to make a donation towards our ministry, you can go to our website at unityofspringfield.org. You can give through our Tithely app, which you can download. You can go to PayPal at ccunity@sbcglobal.net. You can mail a check to Unity of Springfield, 2214 East Seminole Street in Springfield, Missouri. And again, we always thank you so much for all your contributions, physically and monetarily and emotionally and spiritually. You are loved and you are blessed in this church of ours, Unity of Springfield. Hope to see you. Oh, let's see. We got something else here. Okay, tomorrow, Monday, April 19th at 10 a.m., Lisa and other volunteers will be here to work on the meditation garden and organizing the kitchen. Oh, wow, that's fantastic. I didn't even know that. It was just part of the PowerPoint, so I'm reading it. If you can come help, they'd love to have you. And of course, that's tomorrow at 10 a.m. at Unity of Springfield. The New Thought World Religions class on Facebook Live Sundays at 9:15 a.m. on April 25th, which is next Sunday. James Masters will share about the Kabbalion. And I'm really interested in this because I don't know what the Kabbalion is. I'm only familiar with the Kabbalah, which I don't think is related at all. So we're really looking forward to that. We had a great talk today from Karen, and we're going to just really enjoy James's talk next week. Oops. I guess. Okay, we don't have the slideshow for our 11 o'clock service today, but I hope to see you at Unity of Springfield at 11 a.m. today. And I wish you a great Sunday. As always, have a fantastic week. Enjoy the spring weather. It's going to be really nice tomorrow, I think, and then we're dipping low again. So with that, give yourselves a big hug, my love, and namaste to all of you.